You'd think owning a dealership would mean you know everything that happens under your roof. The truth? Sometimes the biggest things happen right under your nose, and you don't see them until it's almost too late. It started on a Tuesday. Mid-month, middle of the week, middle of the slow season. I was reviewing inventory when I heard a low murmur of voices outside my office. Hushed, hurried. That usually meant one thing: drama. I peeked out the frosted glass window and saw 3 of my salespeople huddled near the reception desk, laughing quietly as they watched someone through the showroom's front doors. I stepped into the open and followed their gaze. A man stood just outside the dealership entrance. He looked to be in his late 40s. Thin, neatly dressed but modest, dark jeans, a pale button-down, and a well-worn leather jacket. His shoes were scuffed but clean. He stood with quiet confidence, holding a simple leather satchel and looking inside the showroom, like he was trying to decide whether to walk in or not. Then I heard one of my staff mutter, "Probably looking for a free coffee or a place to charge his phone." They all chuckled. "Bet you he'll ask for a test drive without a license," another whispered. I didn't laugh, I watched. The man opened the door slowly and walked in. His steps were measured, cautious, and when he spoke, it was with a heavy accent. "Good afternoon. I am looking for a vehicle," he said politely, making eye contact with each of the 3 salespeople. None of them stepped forward. One actually turned and walked toward the lot, pretending to check on something. I waited. I wanted to see who would treat him with decency. No one did. Finally, Lisa, the youngest on the team, gestured vaguely toward the sedans. "You can browse over there," she said, her voice dripping with disinterest. Then she turned back to her computer. The man nodded once, calmly, and walked toward the vehicles. Alone. I stood frozen, boiling inside. I should have said something then. I should have walked out and handled it, but I didn't. Instead, I watched him move between the rows with precise focus. He wasn't browsing blindly. He knew what he was looking for. Then, as he leaned into the driver's side of a black hybrid, he pulled out a small notebook and began taking notes, not on the car, but on something deeper. Numbers, stats, maybe even VINs. It wasn't random. 5 minutes passed, then 10. And finally, I stepped out of my office, pretending to inspect the floor. "You finding what you're looking for?" I asked, smiling casually. The man looked up, eyes kind but direct. Yes, I was hoping to speak with someone knowledgeable about performance, resale, safety. His English was careful, measured. Every word was selected like a chess move. "Well, you're in luck," I said. "I own the place." His eyebrows rose slightly, then he smiled. "Even better." We shook hands. His grip was firm but not aggressive. Then he said, "My name is Amir." Just Amir. I offered him a seat in my office. He nodded appreciatively and followed me in. What I didn't know then was that Amir was not who he appeared to be. Not just a curious immigrant with broken English and a quiet demeanor. And I was about to find out that the story unfolding in my own showroom wasn't just about a car, it was about perception, pride, and a truth none of us were prepared for. "So," I said once we sat down, "what brings you here today? Looking for a new car for yourself?" Amir hesitated. "Yes, but also, no," I blinked. "That's cryptic." He smiled again. "I need a car, yes, but more than that, I need to understand how your dealership works." I tilted my head. "You're a competitor?" "No, not exactly." He tapped his notebook. "I have specific requirements, but I do not ask without reason." It was vague, sure, but something about his voice commanded attention. Not in a loud way. In a dangerous, calm kind of way. The way someone might speak when they've lived through storms most people couldn't imagine. I glanced at his notebook. "May I?" I asked. He nodded. I flipped through a few pages and my eyebrows shot up. Emir had documented every local dealership in the area. Notes on inventory, average pricing, customer experience, even staff names. Ours had an entire section. And his review? Baya. Salespeople dismissive, no assistance offered, appeared to judge on accent or clothing. I looked up. "You were testing us?" He nodded slowly. "I have been to 7 dealerships in this city. Yours is the 8th. I leaned back in my chair. This wasn't just a random visit. Emir was doing something big. But what? Before I could ask more, he added softly, I want to buy 3 vehicles, today. My eyes widened. 3? He reached into his jacket and pulled out a checkbook. If the experience is right, if the numbers are fair, I will pay in full. I sat forward, pulse quickening. Can I ask, who are you really? He smiled faintly. You will know. Soon. And that's when the first real twist dropped, because as Amir and I continued talking, one of my senior managers barged in, ignoring him entirely, and said, Hey boss, there's a problem in the service bay. Can we talk? I stood. This is Amir. He's a client. Please show some respect. The manager glanced at him briefly, then muttered, Right, my bad. But I could tell from his tone. He didn't mean it. Amir didn't flinch. He simply closed his notebook and said, I will return, one day, and then everything will be clear. He walked out without another word. And I didn't know it yet. But that moment, the quiet man with the thick accent walking out our glass doors, would mark the beginning of a storm none of us were ready for. For days after Amir left, I couldn't shake the conversation from my mind. Something about him lingered, the way he observed instead of reacted. The precision of his questions. The quiet confidence in every word he chose. My sales team, however, had already forgotten him. I told you he wasn't serious, Lisa said the next morning, sipping her iced coffee like she hadn't brushed off someone with thousands of dollars ready to spend. Probably didn't even have a visa. The others nodded or shrugged. Even my senior manager, Greg, chuckled and said, We get all types here, Mike. Can't take every one of them seriously. I didn't respond. I just walked back into my office and stared at my calendar. I marked the date Amir visited. I didn't know why. It felt important, like something was coming. The next week, the emails started. At first, they seemed routine, messages from potential buyers. But then I noticed a pattern. They weren't asking for specific cars. They were asking about us. How does your dealership treat non-native English speakers? Would your staff assume I can't afford a car based on my accent? Do your salespeople receive diversity training? Each one came from a different name, different email, but the tone was eerily similar. Calm, precise, deliberate. By Thursday, I had over 30 emails like that. And then came the review, a 1-star review on Google, written under the name E.M. It read, Came in to buy 3 vehicles. Was ignored, dismissed, judged. I won't name the dealership, but they'll know who they are. Underneath, hundreds of likes. Dozens of comments, people guessing which dealership it was, sharing their own stories. Some had even been to our place and began piling on. The damage was beginning. Greg came to me in a panic. Should we respond? Should we take it down? This could spiral. I shook my head. No, we need to find him. Greg blinked. What? We need to find Amir. I want to talk to him again. But why? He's clearly trying to tank us. I stood. No, Greg. He's trying to teach us something, and we're not listening. The next day, I drove around to every dealership I knew in town, the ones he'd marked in that notebook. I asked if anyone had seen a man matching his description. Most said no. One guy at an Audi dealership paused and said, Oh yeah, foreign dude with a notebook? Came in, asked a bunch of weird questions, didn't even test drive anything. Then he dipped. Did he buy anything? I asked. The guy laughed. Nah. But a few days later, our GM got an email from some consultant asking about internal training protocols. Consultant. That word sat with me. What if Amir wasn't a customer at all? Balother for black. What if this was the test? Bulak. I returned to the dealership late that afternoon. Our showroom was unusually quiet. I went back to my office and started researching. I Googled phrases like immigrant customer testing dealerships, diversity audit car industry, mystery buyer dealership discrimination. Then I found something. A blog post on a little-known industry site titled, When the Customer Isn't Just a Customer. The author? E. Mirza. It detailed anonymous visits to auto dealerships across the country, undercover investigations, disguised assessments of how staff treated clients of varying ethnicities, accents, and backgrounds. Some dealerships passed. Most failed. The writing was articulate, powerful, chilling. At the end of the article, the author explained why he did it. I was dismissed too many times in my own life, So now, I give businesses the chance to reveal themselves without knowing they're being watched. And then one final line. One day, I'll walk into a dealership. And instead of walking out with notes, I'll walk out with keys, but only if they prove they deserve my business. It had to be him. Emir Mirza. I felt cold all over. This wasn't about a car. This wasn't even about reputation. This was about the kind of people we had become. People who judged others in seconds. People who filtered customers by appearance, accent, or assumptions. I sat there, stunned, until I heard a voice in the hallway. A deep voice. Familiar. Calm. I stepped out. Emir was back. He stood at the reception desk. Alone. Same leather jacket. Same satchel. But this time, something was different. He wasn't looking around cautiously. He wasn't waiting to be approached. He was watching. Lisa spotted him and immediately stiffened. Hi. Can I help you?" Emir looked at her, then turned to me as I approached. "I see your team remembers me," he said. I stepped forward, extending my hand. "Mr. Mirza." He nodded slightly, then looked around the showroom. "This time, I have come not to observe, but to conclude." "Conclude?" He opened his satchel. Inside were 3 folded envelopes. He handed them to me. The first envelope contained a certified check for $210,000. The second had a letter of recommendation for the dealership, if we passed his final test. The third was a non-disclosure agreement. I blinked. "What is this?" Emir's voice was low. "You're not the only dealership I visited. But you are the only one whose owner reached out. Whose owner tried to understand. That matters." I felt a lump in my throat. Emir continued. "But I am not the one buying the cars." I frowned. "Then who is?" He smiled. "My foundation. We donate vehicles to refugee families, immigrants who have lost everything. But we only buy from dealers who treat people with dignity, regardless of who they are or how they speak." I stared at him, speechless. Behind me, the staff had gone silent. Emir stepped closer. "The final test is simple," he said. "Let's walk the lot together. Introduce me to your team. I want to see if anything's changed." And with that, the man we dismissed was now the one deciding our future. Emir didn't rush. He moved slowly, purposefully, and with quiet command, like he'd walked dealership floors more times than we could count. He paused at the first car on the lot, a cherry red crossover, and turned to Lisa. She froze. "This one," he said, gesturing to the price tag. "What is the average resale value in 3 years, assuming standard depreciation and a 12,000-mile annual usage?" Lisa blinked like she hadn't heard him. I think I'd have to check the system," she stammered. "You should already know," he said gently but firmly. "If you expect people to trust you." I watched the color drain from her face. Lisa wasn't a bad person, but like the others, she had become too comfortable taking people at surface value. Too quick to size someone up and put them in a box. Emir turned to Jacob next. "This vehicle." He pointed at a hybrid SUV. "What's the warranty difference between this and its 2022 model?" Jacob tried to play it cool. "There's not much. Maybe a few tweaks in mileage, but it's basically the same." Emir didn't say a word, just tilted his head, waiting. I stepped in. "Actually, there's a new emissions warranty adjustment on the 2023 model EPA mandated." Emir smiled slightly. "Correct. Thank you, Michael." Jacob shot me a quick glance, then looked down. We walked the entire lot that way. Car by car. Question by question. But Emir wasn't just testing knowledge. He was watching how we responded. Who looked him in the eye, who addressed him with respect, who interrupted or dismissed, and most importantly, who listened. He was quiet most of the time, but when he finally stopped near the glass showroom doors, he said, "Do you know what it feels like to be invisible in a room full of people?" The air went still. I've stood in boardrooms where no one would shake my hand. I've taught university seminars where students assumed I was the janitor. I've applied for jobs where they complimented my resume, until they heard my accent. He turned and looked directly at Greg, our senior manager. And I've walked into dealerships where I was laughed at for being too foreign to afford a car. Greg shifted awkwardly. I knew he remembered that first day. The dismissive tone. The smirk. He hadn't forgotten. It was just easier to pretend it never happened. Amir took a breath. You think I care about cars? I care about who sells them. Because every car you sell, you also sell a piece of trust. A moment of belonging. Or a rejection. No one said a word. Even customers inside the showroom seemed to stop moving. You could feel it in the air, something cracking, something shifting. Then Amir turned to me. Michael, you chose to follow up, you searched for answers, you saw past the surface. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. So now I will tell you who I really am. He reached into his satchel and pulled out a small business card. It was sleek, embossed, and bore a logo I'd seen before, but never connected until now. The Horizon Initiative. My breath caught. The Horizon Initiative was a high-profile nonprofit that funded transportation, education, and housing for refugees across the U.S. I'd read about them last year in a feature in Forbes. They had donated over $30 million in vehicle grants alone. Amir Mirza wasn't just affiliated with the initiative, he was its founder. You want to know how I built this organization, he said? I was an engineer in my country. Then I became a taxi driver here. Then a night security guard. Then a delivery man. But I never forgot what it felt like to be treated as less than. I watched. I learned. I listened. And I built a system that does what people won't always do, offer dignity without condition. He handed me the check again. You passed the test. Barely. But you passed it because you looked inward. And because you chose to care after you failed. I nodded slowly, still processing. Amir looked around once more, then said, If you want to accept this deal, I have one condition. Anything, I said. He pointed at the glass wall. That office. That team. I want you to bring in someone who understands what it means to be overlooked. Hire someone who knows struggle, someone you wouldn't normally hire based on a resume. Give someone else the chance I never had. My chest tightened. That's not a suggestion, he added. It's the price. I swallowed hard. Deal. He extended his hand. Then let's do business. We shook. But even then, I had no idea what would happen next. Because the second twist was already on its way. And this one wouldn't just change my dealership. It would change me. The day after Amir and I shook hands, I gathered my team. Most of them were still shaken. Some confused. A few embarrassed. Greg, in particular, couldn't stop fidgeting. His pride had taken a hit, but I knew the real battle ahead wasn't about him. It was about whether we could evolve. I made a promise, I told them, once we were all in the conference room, not just to Mr. Mirza, but to this business. We're hiring someone new, someone outside of our usual system, and I don't care if they've never worked a day in sales, we're going to teach them, or we're going to learn from them. A few faces tensed. Lisa raised her hand. So, we're just giving away a job to someone with no experience? Is that fair? I paused, choosing my words carefully. It's not about fairness. It's about vision. Our blind spots almost cost us everything. This is how we change. They didn't cheer. They didn't clap. But they listened. And for now, that was enough. The next week, I placed a unique job listing. No degree required. No experience in sales needed. Just one thing. Have you ever been overlooked, judged too quickly, or denied a chance to prove yourself? We're listening. Tell us your story. The responses were overwhelming. I read letters from formerly incarcerated individuals, immigrants, single parents, war veterans, foster kids. Some made me cry. Others made me angry at the world. But one stood out. Her name was Nora. She'd fled Venezuela 3 years ago with her younger brother. Worked at a dry cleaner, then as a caregiver for elderly clients, while putting herself through night classes to learn English. She never once applied for anything that required customer-facing skills, because every time she opened her mouth, people assumed she was uneducated. But her letter wasn't bitter. It was steady, hopeful. She wrote, I don't want special treatment, I just want to stop being invisible. I called her that night. When she came in for the interview, she wore a modest gray blazer and had her hair neatly tied back. Her hands trembled slightly as she greeted me. You don't need to be nervous, I said. She smiled. I'm just not used to being treated like I belong here. I hired her on the spot. Training Nora was unlike anything we'd done before. She didn't just absorb information, she devoured it. Every pamphlet, every stat sheet, every warranty detail. She stayed late, shadowed the other reps, asked the kind of questions most trainees were too embarrassed to ask. At first, the rest of the team kept their distance. But one by one, that changed. Jacob was the first to crack. One afternoon, he watched her explain a vehicle's hybrid system to a couple in fluent Spanish. She didn't pitch it like a salesperson. She described it like someone trying to make the best decision for their family. After they left, Jacob muttered, "I couldn't have done that. Not like that." Nora blushed. "I practiced all night. I used YouTube videos to learn how to say fuel efficiency correctly." Greg, however, stayed cold. Professional, but distant. He didn't like change, especially change that reflected what he had failed to see. Then came the test. Immigrant. 3 weeks after Nora started, a man walked in wearing a ripped t-shirt and beat-up sneakers. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days. None of the senior salespeople moved. But Nora did. She approached him, greeted him warmly, and sat him down with a bottle of water. 10 minutes later, they were walking the lot together. I watched the whole thing from my office. She treated him no differently than she would have treated a man in a suit. Asked him the right questions, gave him space to think, never once talked down to him. When they returned, I saw something that made my stomach drop. The man pulled out a cashier's check, $97,000, in full, for a brand new luxury SUV. The whole floor fell silent. After the paperwork was signed, he turned to me and said, "She's the first person in 5 dealerships to speak to me like I mattered, so I decided, she's who gets the sale." He left without fanfare, but his presence lingered like thunderdot. Later that day, Greg came to my office. He looked different, less guarded, more human. "I need to talk to you," he said. "Sure." He sat down, rubbed his face, and then said, "I treated Amir like a joke. I treated Nora like she didn't belong. And today I watched her close a deal none of us could have." I didn't speak. "I need to do better," he continued. "I want to do better, but I don't know how." I nodded. "Start by admitting you were wrong, to her, to yourself." He nodded. The next morning he did just that, in front of the team. He stood by her desk and said, "I misjudged you, and I'm sorry." Nora looked up, stunned. Then she smiled. "I forgive you," she said, "but only if you help me beat your sales numbers next month." He laughed. Deal. What Amir taught us wasn't just about how we looked at him. It was about how we looked at everyone. And Nora? Insada. She didn't just change the culture, she redefined it. But Amir wasn't done with us yet. Because 2 weeks later, I received an invitation, hand-delivered, sealed in navy blue wax. And what it led to was the final twist I never expected. The envelope was thick, luxurious even. My name was printed in precise calligraphy on the front. No title, no company name, just Michael. Inside was a single card on embossed stationery. You saw beneath the surface. Now it's time to see what's behind the curtain. EM below that, a location, a date, and a time. 1 week from today. No further explanation. I showed it to Nora, who looked at it like a golden ticket. "Do you think it's a thank you event?" she asked. "I don't know," I said. "With Amir, nothing is ever what it seems." Still, I cleared my schedule. I booked a flight. I didn't tell my staff much, just that I had a private meeting related to the Horizon Initiative. I arrived in D.C. on a gray morning, the air thick with spring humidity. The address led to a sleek, glass building nestled between 2 embassies. The doorman nodded without question, and led me to an elevator that required a key card only he had. The doors opened to a private penthouse office, and standing there, waiting, was Amir. But he wasn't alone. Behind him, seated at a long conference table, were 7 other people, men and women of varying backgrounds, all sharply dressed, all watching me closely. "Michael," Amir said, extending a hand. "Welcome." I shook it, still unsure what was happening. "So, what is this?" Amir gestured to the group. "These are my board members. And today, we're interviewing you." My stomach dropped. "Interviewing me? For what?" He smiled gently. "To become a partner," I blinked. "A partner? In Horizon?" "Yes. We're launching a pilot program, a network of verified, immigrant-friendly dealerships. We've vetted hundreds of applicants and narrowed it to 5. You're the first. We don't just want you to sell cars. We want you to be part of something bigger. I sank into the offered chair. I don't even know what to say. Say yes, said a woman in a green blazer, her accent faintly East African. We've been watching your transformation. And you've shown what most don't? Accountability. Another man chimed in. We read the reviews. Watched the staff changes. We saw the hire you made. The training sessions. You turned a moment of shame into a model for change. I swallowed hard. But I made mistakes. Big ones. Emir nodded. We all have. The difference is, you didn't run from them. A silence passed. Then he added, I want your dealership to be our first flagship location, not just for car donations, but for immigrant employment, training and outreach. You'll lead the program. Set the tone. Train other business owners. This isn't charity. It's infrastructure. It felt like too much, like I was sitting in someone else's chair. But then I remembered Nora's first sale. Emir's notebook. The man with the check for $97,000. This wasn't about business anymore. It was about building something that outlived the sale. I looked around the room and said, yes. And just like that, the next chapter began. 3 months later, our dealership had changed completely. We'd remodeled part of the showroom into a community center, free ESL classes on Wednesdays, financial literacy workshops on Saturdays. We brought in translators for Spanish, Arabic, and Vietnamese customers. Our staff was now a quilt of backgrounds, ages, accents, and business booming. Customers didn't just come to buy, they came to belong. Nora became our top salesperson in just 8 weeks. Greg started mentoring new hires. Lisa spearheaded a hiring initiative for women re-entering the workforce. And me? I no longer ran a dealership. I led a movement. One afternoon, as I stood near the coffee bar we'd installed for walk-in visitors, I spotted Emir at the door. No fanfare, no camera crew, just him. He walked in quietly, smiling at the changes. You kept your promise, he said. We're just getting started. He nodded, then pulled something from his jacket. A gift box. Inside, the original notebook, his notes, his observations, the pages that exposed us, and ultimately, redefined us. I don't need it anymore, he said. I only keep records where change is needed. I looked down at the final page. He had written just one word. Home. We once dismissed a man for his accent. Now we honor him with every conversation we have. He didn't just walk into our dealership. He walked into our lives and left behind a legacy far more valuable than any car could ever be. 6 months after Emir first walked through our doors, I stood in the middle of my dealership during an event we never could have imagined back then, our first Drive with Dignity Day. The showroom buzzed with energy. Rows of chairs were set up near the service bay, where our staff was handing over the keys to donated vehicles for 10 families, all recent immigrants, all vetted through the Horizon Initiative. Their stories were etched into their faces, quiet pride, worn strength, and cautious hope. And right there in the middle of it all was Nora, walking a nervous mother of 3 through the Bluetooth settings in her new car like she was delivering treasure. We didn't advertise the event, no media, no microphones, just people helping people. The same place that once whispered insults behind closed glass was now filled with languages I couldn't even identify, but every single one of them sounded like belonging. Emir stood beside me, arms crossed, eyes sweeping the floor. It's working, he said. I nodded. It's becoming something real. He turned to me, more serious now. But you need to prepare. Once you start shifting culture, there will be resistance. Some will mock this. Others will accuse you of pandering. Or worse, tokenizing. I sighed. They already have. And I don't care. He smiled. Good. That night, after the families drove off, we closed the lot early. The staff gathered in the conference room, eating leftover cake and recounting their favorite moments. Someone had brought a guitar. Someone else had tears in their eyes. Greg raised his drink and said, to second chances. For all of us, Lisa added. And to not judging a book by its passport. Laughter broke out. But I just sat there, looking around, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Purpose. A few weeks later, I was invited to speak at a national auto dealer summit in Atlanta. Me, just a guy who once ran a showroom that turned away a man with a notebook and an accent. I told the audience the truth, that we failed, that we judged, that we almost lost something we didn't even know we were being given. I talked about Emir, about Nora, about Greg's apology, about the anonymous man with $97,000 and a wounded heart. And when I was done, there was silence. Not applause, not a standing ovation. Silence. And then, one clap, then two, then the whole room. Because what I said they all knew. Deep down, they'd all done it. The assumptions, the dismissals, the moments of pride disguised as gut instinct. I wasn't just telling my story, I was telling theirs. A year after Amir's visit, the Horizon Initiative expanded to 20 dealerships nationwide. We became the model, not because we were perfect, but because we were honest about being imperfect. We still made mistakes, but now we faced them, corrected them, learned from them. One morning, Nora brought me a letter she received from a customer. It was written in elegant, careful handwriting. Dear Nora, you didn't just sell me a car. You made me feel human. You asked about my family. You listened when my English fumbled. You didn't rush me. And when I drove home in that little silver sedan, I realized something. I finally feel like I belong here. Thank you for seeing me. Farhad. She folded the letter and pressed it to her chest. He reminded me of my brother, she whispered. I didn't ask why. I didn't need to. And then came the day I feared most. Amir collapsed at a Horizon event in Chicago. A minor stroke, they said. He recovered quickly, but the message was clear. He was scaling back, handing the torch off. He called me from his hospital bed. You're not just a partner now, he said. You're a steward. Of the program? Of the mission? I sat in silence. Promise me, he said, his voice fainter than I remembered. Promise me you won't let them forget who they are. I promise, I said. And I kept it. Years later, when people asked me what changed my dealership, I didn't talk about profit margins or new inventory software or expansion to 2 new lots. I told them about the day a man walked in and was laughed at. I told them about a young woman who no one would have hired and how she became the heart of our floor. I told them that the biggest sale I ever made didn't come with a commission check. It came with conviction. So now, when someone new walks through our doors, accent thick, eyes uncertain, I watch closely, not them, but my staff. And if even one person hesitates, I tell them this story, the one about the man they dismissed, and the legacy he left behind. Stories like this remind us that sometimes the greatest transformations begin with a quiet voice and a bold question. If this one moved you, there are many more to come, each filled with moments that challenge, inspire, and change perspectives. Subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories that uncover what people hide and reveal what truly matters.